July 1973, New York City. A federal courthouse in downtown Manhattan sits waiting for a defendant who will never arrive. Frank Matthews, one of the most prolific black traffickers of his era, who built a network that law enforcement reporting later said reached as many as 21 states by the early 1970s, who lived across the street from the Gambino crime family boss and never once paid tribute, has just walked out of the game with an estimated $20 million in cash and his girlfriend Cheryl Brown. The judge issues a warrant. DEA posted a $20,000 reward for information leading to his capture, at the time a notably large bounty. U.S. Marshals add him to their most wanted list. None of it matters. Frank Matthews has vanished. Not arrested, not killed, not captured. Just gone. 50 years later, he is still missing. Every other kingpin from that era, Frank Lucas, Nicky Barnes, and Leroy Barnes, all ended up in courtrooms, pointing fingers, cutting deals, and giving up names to shave decades off their sentences. Matthews gave up nothing, took everything, disappeared. Here's how it went down. Durham, North Carolina, 1944. A boy named Frank Larry Matthews enters the world in the segregated South. They call him Pee-wee because of his size. Small kid, quiet, the kind who watches before he moves. His early education comes fast and hard. By the time he is a teenager, he has already learned the first lesson of the streets. Everything is a hustle, and every hustle has a margin. His first real trouble comes over chickens. Stealing them, simple theft that lands him in reform school. Most people look at juvenile detention as punishment. Matthews sees it as orientation. The kids in there are not learning math and English. They are learning which crimes pay and which ones do not. They are learning that getting caught stealing chickens means you need to steal something more valuable, something harder to trace. Reform school does not scare him straight. It sharpens him. He comes out understanding something fundamental about American economics. Legal business and illegal business operate on the same principle: supply, demand, distribution, margin. The only difference is who writes the rules and who enforces them. For Matthews, that is the lesson he will build on. By the late 1950s, Matthews relocates to Philadelphia, then to New York. He is working as a barber, cutting hair during the day, but his real education happens after hours. The numbers game, illegal lottery. Every day, thousands of black Americans place bets on 3-digit combinations. Every night, the runners collect the slips and the cash. Every week, the bankers tally the winnings and the losses. Matthews is not running numbers for the thrill. He is studying the infrastructure. The numbers racket teaches him logistics. How do you collect money from hundreds of locations without getting robbed or arrested? How do you track who owes what without leaving a paper trail? How do you manage a workforce that operates entirely outside the law? The margins are thin, a nickel and dime operation. A numbers banker might clear a few thousand a week if he is lucky, if the cops do not shake him down, if his runners do not skim, if no one hits a big number that wipes out his reserves. Matthews looks at the operation and sees the ceiling. There is only so much money in 3-digit bets. The real money, the serious money, is in narcotics. But here's the problem with narcotics in the 1960s in New York. The Italian Mafia controls importation. Every kilo of heroin entering the country passes through their hands or their approved channels. Black dealers can distribute on the street, run corners, and manage retail operations. But wholesale importation is a closed shop. The 5 families, Gambino, Bonanno, Colombo, Genovese, and Lucchese, have carved up the supply chain and they are not sharing. Matthews approaches them anyway. He requests a meeting to discuss business arrangements, wholesale purchasing, and the possibility of becoming a serious buyer rather than a street-level retailer. The response is quick and clear: no. Black dealers do not sit at the table. Black dealers buy from Italian middlemen at inflated prices and say thank you. That is the arrangement. That is how it has always been. Most people would accept that answer. They find their position in the hierarchy, take what they are given, and build within the boundary someone else drew. Matthews is not most people. He looks at the Italian monopoly and sees exactly what it is: a tax, a surcharge, a toll booth on every gram that enters his community. And toll booths can be bypassed if you know the back roads. The bypass came through Harlem contacts who provided introductions to Cuban suppliers and other international sources, allowing Matthews to develop independent supply lines. But Matthews wants more than cocaine, he wants heroin too. For heroin, he needs the French Connection. The French Connection is not a movie to Frank Matthews. It is a business opportunity. Corsican gangsters in Marseille, France operate the largest heroin refinement operation in the world. Turkish opium gets processed in French labs, converted to pure heroin, and shipped to America. The Italians have been the primary American customers for decades, but the Corsicans are businessmen. They will sell to anyone with cash. Matthews establishes contact, sends representatives to Marseille, and negotiates directly with Corsican suppliers. The logistics are complex. Shipments must cross the Atlantic, landing spots must be secured, and distribution networks must be established. All of this happens without the protection or approval of the established American underworld. By the late 1960s, Matthews had developed substantial independent supply lines for heroin and cocaine that reduced his reliance on traditional Italian-controlled channels. The savings are enormous. Without the Italian tax, Matthews can undercut every competitor in the market while still maintaining higher margins than anyone else. The operation grows fast. Matthews recruits carefully. He recruits former numbers runners who understand cash management, Vietnam veterans who understand discipline and violence, and businessmen who understand logistics. He does not want gangsters who attract attention. He wants professionals who solve problems. The product flows into Brooklyn. A converted building they call the Ponderosa becomes the primary cutting mill. Another location gets nicknamed the OK Corral. These are not trap houses where addicts line up at the door. These are pharmaceutical operations. Workers wear surgical masks to avoid inhaling product. The heroin is cut with quinine, measured precisely, with consistent quality. Matthews understands something his competitors do not. Brand reliability matters even in illegal markets. When customers buy from a Matthews distributor, they know what they are getting. It has the same potency every time. That reliability creates loyalty. That loyalty creates market share. The cocaine operation runs parallel. While most East Coast dealers focus exclusively on heroin in the late 1960s, Matthews sees the future. Cocaine is coming. This is the white powder that Hollywood celebrities snort at parties. The drug does not carry heroin's stigma of desperation. Matthews positions himself early, building supply relationships before demand explodes. By 1970, the operation spans states, not neighborhoods, not boroughs, but states, 21 of them. Philadelphia, Baltimore, Atlanta, Cleveland, Detroit, Cincinnati. Anywhere there is a black community with money to spend, Matthews has distribution. That is not a drug operation. That is a franchise model. The money requires management. Cash piles up faster than it can be spent. Matthews develops a system. He makes regular trips to Las Vegas. He walks into a casino carrying a suitcase full of bills. He gambles heavily at the tables. He wins some, he loses some, it does not matter. He exchanges the chips for clean casino checks. Money that came from heroin on 125th Street is now money that came from blackjack at the Sands. The casinos do not ask questions. The house always wins in the end, and Matthews is willing to pay their percentage for the service. But the real statement, the move that defines Frank Matthews, comes in 1971. He buys a house, not in Harlem, not in Brooklyn, not in any of the black neighborhoods where he made his fortune. He buys a mansion on Buttonwood Road in Todd Hill, Staten Island. Picture this, Todd Hill in 1971, the most exclusive neighborhood in New York City. White families, old money, and organized crime royalty. Paul Castellano, underboss of the Gambino family, lives there. Carlo Gambino himself, boss of bosses, lives nearby. This is mafia territory, the kind of place where black faces do not appear except behind lawnmowers or steering wheels. Frank Matthews moves in across the street from Paul Castellano, not down the block, not around the corner, across the street, direct line of sight from window to window. The house costs a fortune, $300,000 in 1971 money. He pays cash. He decorates it with sheepskin rugs, mink furniture, all the trappings of success that scream new money. He parks his Ferrari in the driveway. He walks his dogs on the same sidewalks where mafia wives push strollers. The message is unmistakable. I do not need your permission. I do not pay your tax. I live in your neighborhood, drive better cars than you, and there's nothing you can do about it. The same men who refused to let him sit at their table now have to watch him throw parties next door. The audacity is almost incomprehensible. The Italian mob had killed men for lesser insults, but Matthews calculates correctly. He is not muscling in on Italian territory. He is not selling to Italian customers. He is servicing black communities that the mob never cared about anyway. Killing him would require effort and create problems without any corresponding benefit. So they watch, and they seethe, and they do nothing. By 1971, Matthews is pulling in more money per month than most people earn in a lifetime. Conservative estimates put his annual revenue in the tens of millions. Adjusted for inflation, we are talking about operations generating over $100 million a year, all before his 30th birthday, all without a single Italian godfather getting a taste. But empires attract attention. Frank Matthews is about to attract the attention of the federal government in a way that will change drug enforcement forever. Reports say Matthews encouraged coordination and communication among major distributors in the early 1970s, a development that alarmed law enforcement. The FBI and the DEA learn about the summit. The intelligence sends shockwaves through federal agencies. This is not just organized crime. This is organized crime getting more organized. A unified black narcotics syndicate with its own international supply connections represents a fundamental shift in the American drug trade. The priorities change overnight. Frank Matthews moves from target to threat. But Matthews isn't just attracting federal attention, he's attracting local heat too. And local heat bleeds. Philadelphia, the Black Mafia, a separate organization with its own leadership, its own territory, its own ambitions. They are not affiliated with Matthews. They are not interested in confederation. They see his expansion into their city as invasion, and they respond the way organizations like theirs always respond. Tyrone Palmer, Matthews' main distributor in Philadelphia. He handles the flow of product through the city. Reliable, profitable, trusted. It is Easter Sunday at a club called Club Harlem. Palmer is there enjoying the holiday, surrounded by people. Then he is not. Gunshots in a crowded club. Palmer goes down, dead before the music stops. The message is clear. Philadelphia belongs to the Black Mafia. Matthews can expand elsewhere. The response demonstrates something important about Matthews' operation. He has muscle. He has enforcers. The war in Philadelphia proves that while Matthews prefers business to violence, he is capable of both. Bodies accumulate, territory gets contested, blood runs in both directions. Matthews survives the Philadelphia conflict. His organization survives, but the war draws even more attention, more surveillance, more wiretaps, more informants. The federal government is building a case and Frank Matthews is running out of room to maneuver. 1972. The walls are closing in. The Drug Enforcement Administration, newly formed and aggressive, has made Matthews a priority target. Wiretaps capture conversations. Informants provide testimony. The evidence accumulates. Grand jury proceedings begin. January 1973. The arrest. Federal agents take Frank Matthews into custody. The charges are extensive. Conspiracy to distribute narcotics, interstate trafficking, enough counts to guarantee decades in federal prison. The man who built an empire spanning 21 states, who who outmaneuvered the Italian mob, who lived across the street from Paul Castellano, is finally in handcuffs. But here is where the story takes its turn. Here is where Frank Matthews becomes legend instead of just another kingpin who rose and fell. At the bail hearing, the judge sets the amount at $325,000, a fortune for most defendants. For Matthews, pocket change. He pays cash, walks out of federal custody, and returns to the world. The trial is scheduled. The evidence is overwhelming. Conviction is virtually certain. Life in prison awaits. Most defendants in that situation hire lawyers, file motions, delay proceedings, and eventually accept whatever deal the government offers. Matthews has different plans. July 2nd, 1973. Frank Matthews is supposed to appear in court. The courtroom fills. The prosecutors wait. The judge waits. The clock ticks past the scheduled time. No defendant. Frank Matthews has vanished. Not gone underground in New York. Not hiding in a safe house in Philadelphia. Gone. Completely. Along with his girlfriend Cheryl Brown and an estimated $15 to $20 million in cash. Evaporated from the face of the earth. The response is immediate. An arrest warrant is issued. Every law enforcement agency in the country receives his photograph and description. The U.S. Marshals add him to their fugitive list. The DEA posts a bounty, $20,000 for information leading to his capture. The highest reward offered for any fugitive since John Dillinger. Days pass, weeks, months, years, nothing. The search spans continents. Agents investigate reports from Africa, from South America, from the Caribbean. Rumors place Matthews in various countries, always one step ahead, always impossible to confirm. The investigation follows money trails that dead end in offshore accounts. It pursues tips that lead nowhere. It chases ghosts across 3 decades. The theories multiply. Matthews got plastic surgery and rebuilt his face. Matthews died shortly after disappearing, and someone buried the body where it would never be found. Matthews established a new identity in a country without extradition treaties and lived out his days as a wealthy expatriate. None of these theories have ever been confirmed. None have been definitively disproven. What is known is this: Frank Matthews accomplished what no other major American drug kingpin has ever accomplished. He walked away, not in handcuffs, not in a body bag, not in a courtroom pointing fingers at former associates in exchange for a reduced sentence. He walked away clean with enough money to last multiple lifetimes, and he never looked back. Consider the comparison. Frank Lucas, the Harlem heroin dealer who later became famous through American Gangster, was arrested, convicted, and served time. He cooperated with federal prosecutors and testified against corrupt police officers and former associates. Nicky Barnes, once called Mr. Untouchable by the New York Times, was arrested, convicted, and became a federal witness, providing testimony that put dozens of people in prison and spending years in witness protection. Every major drug dealer from that era eventually faced the same choice: prison or cooperation, silence or snitching. Cooperation and prison were the common outcomes. Matthews faced neither. He made his own third option: disappear. The mathematics of his escape remain staggering. $20 million in 1973 has the purchasing power of well over $100 million today. Enough to buy citizenship in countries that sell it. Enough to purchase complete anonymity in places where cash speaks louder than law enforcement requests. Enough to establish a new life, a new identity, a new existence entirely separate from the man who once lived across the street from Paul Castellano. The DIA officially keeps his case open. The FBI maintains his file. Every few years, some journalist publishes a "Where Are They Now" piece speculating about his fate. His photograph, aged by computer enhancement to approximate his current appearance, circulates among law enforcement agencies. But these are formalities. Administrative procedures maintain more out of institutional pride than genuine expectation of resolution. The reality is simpler and more remarkable. Frank Matthews got away with it. But getting away isn't the same as winning. And the game Frank Matthews played exacted costs that no amount of money can measure. The heroin he moved destroyed communities. It flooded black neighborhoods with addiction during the precise years when those communities were fighting for civil rights, economic opportunity, and political power. The same blocks where families organized voter registration drives became blocks where families buried children dead from overdoses. The same churches that hosted freedom riders became churches that hosted funerals for people who could not stop using. Matthews did not create American heroin addiction. The demand existed before him and continued after he vanished. But he professionalized the supply. He made it reliable. He made it accessible. He made it cheap enough that people who could not afford escape from poverty through any other means could afford escape through his product. The violence tied to his organization left bodies across the eastern seaboard. Tyrone Palmer was not the only one. Rivals were eliminated. Informants were silenced. Dealers who skimmed or stole or talked became examples for others. The mathematics of his operation required enforcement, and enforcement in the drug trade has only one currency. The associates he left behind faced the consequences he avoided. When Matthews vanished, the federal investigation did not vanish with him. Prosecutors needed convictions. Without the kingpin, they went after the knights and bishops, men who had worked under Matthews, distributed for Matthews, trusted Matthews, found themselves facing decades in prison. Some cooperated, providing whatever testimony the government wanted in exchange for reduced sentences. Some refused and served their full terms. None of them walked away with $20 million. Cheryl Brown disappeared with him. She vanished from her own life, her own family, her own history. Whatever happened to her, wherever she ended up, she traded everything she knew for a future tied entirely to a man on the run. If Matthews is alive, perhaps they are still together, growing old in some unextradited corner of the world. If he is dead, perhaps she has spent 50 years keeping secrets that no longer matter. Either way, she paid a price that never shows up in the accounting of his escape. And the game itself, the drug trade that Matthews helped transform from street corner hustle to corporate enterprise, continued without him. It grew larger, more violent, more profitable. The model he pioneered, direct importation bypassing traditional gatekeepers, became standard practice. The franchise approach he developed, consistent product quality across multiple markets, became industry standard. He was not just a drug dealer, he was an innovator, and his innovations outlived his career. The Italian Mafia eventually lost their monopoly on importation. The Colombians and Mexicans established their own pipelines. The French connection was dismantled by international law enforcement. The market Matthews helped create absorbed and surpassed everything he built. The game does not care about individual players. It just keeps playing. Today, the DEA Museum displays photographs of major drug traffickers who have been captured or killed. Frank Matthews is not among them. He occupies a different category, the one that got away, the ghost in the files, the reminder that all the surveillance, all the informants, all the resources of the American justice system sometimes are not enough. Investigators who worked his case are retired now or dead. The witnesses who might have testified against him have scattered or passed. The evidence that would have convicted him gathers dust in storage facilities, relevant only to historians and documentary filmmakers. The case remains technically open, officially unsolved, and practically irrelevant. The streets remember him differently than law enforcement does. In certain circles, in certain neighborhoods, Frank Matthews is a legend. The man who beat the Italians at their own game. The man who built an empire without bowing to anyone. The man who faced the full weight of the federal government and simply walked away. The comparison matters. Every other kingpin from that era either died in violence or died in cooperation. Matthews did neither, but legends don't tell the whole story. The neighborhoods that remember Frank Matthews as a folk hero are the same neighborhoods his product devastated. The communities that celebrate his defiance of authority are the same communities that buried generations to heroin addiction. The game he mastered was never designed to have winners, only survivors. Frank Matthews survived. That's not the same as winning. That's not the same as legacy. That's not the same as anything except being somewhere, anywhere, alive, with enough money to never need anything except peace of mind that cash can't buy. The question isn't whether Frank Matthews got away with it. He did. The question is whether getting away was worth what it cost. Whether $20 million and 50 years of hiding balances against a lifetime of looking over your shoulder. Whether the freedom of anonymity compensates for the prison of isolation. Whether beating the system means anything when the system keeps running regardless. The game doesn't answer those questions. The game just moves on. New players replace old players. New empires rise where old empires fell. New kingpins live fast and die young or age slowly in prison cells. And somewhere, maybe an old man who used to be called Pee-wee watches from whatever shadows he's found, knowing that the world he helped create keeps spinning without him. Staten Island doesn't remember him. The mansion on Buttonwood Road has changed hands multiple times. New families live there now, probably never knowing that their address once housed the most wanted black man in America. Paul Castellano was long dead, murdered outside a steakhouse in 1985 on orders from John Gotti. The entire world Matthews knew has been replaced, but the absence remains. The open case file, the unanswered questions, the $20,000 bounty that was never collected, the ghost that law enforcement couldn't catch, couldn't kill, couldn't bring to justice through any of the mechanisms designed specifically for that purpose. Frank Matthews, from Durham chickens to French heroin, from reform school to Todd Hill, from handcuffs to vanishing. 50 years missing, $20 million gone. One disappearance that proved the game has exits, if you're willing to walk through them and never look back. That's how the Pee-wee from Durham beat everybody. Not by winning, by leaving. And in the game that kills everyone who stays, leaving might be the only victory that counts. 21 states. Massive quantities of narcotics. One ghost who walked away with the money. That's how Frank Matthews ended. Or didn't.